After the after winter visitors, Thoreau goes into pond in winter and then springtime, and that's about 40 more pages until he comes to the conclusion in Walden. That's about how much there is. We continue where we were. We had the fox come by with the hounds chasing him. We had the hunter, and then the strange behavior of the hounds. They don't expect to catch the fox. The hunter who told me this could remember one Sam Nutting who used to hunt bears on Fairhaven ledges and exchange their skins for rum in Concord Village. Who told him even that he had seen a moose there. Nutting had a famous foxhound named Borgonia. He pronounced it Begin, which my informant used to borrow in the waste book of an old trader of this town, who was also a captain, town clerk, and representative. I find an entry, January 18, 1742 to 43. Quote, John Melvin, C.R. by 1 Grey Fox 023. They are not now found here, and in his ledger, February 7th, 1743, it's a full 100 years prior. Hezekiah Stratton has credit, quote, by I have cat skin 0, 1, 4.5, unquote. Of course, a wildcat. These are prior animals, I guess. He's talking about a wildcat and moose and bear were in the area. At least 1743, 100 years prior. For Stratton was a sergeant in the old French war, and would not have got credit for hunting less noble game. You could hunt wildcat, bear, and moose. It's more noble to hunt a lot. Credit is given for deer skins also, and they are daily sold. One man still preserves the horns of the last deer that was killed in this vicinity, and another has told me the particulars of the hunt in which his uncle was engaged. Talking about hunting 100 years prior. The hunters were formerly a numerous and merry crew here. I remember well one gaunt Nimrod who would catch up a leaf by the roadside and play a strain on it, wilder and more melodious. In my memory serves me than any hunting horn. At midnight, when there was a moon, I sometimes met with hounds in my path, prowling about the woods, which would skulk out of my way. You seen a dog skulk out of your way? Yeah, as if afraid, and stand silent amid the bushes till I had passed. Squirrels and wild mice disputed for my store of nuts. There were scores. How do you preserve your nuts when you got mice and squirrels around? You have to put them in a glass jar sealed or something. So you have a good seal. There were scores of pitch pines around my house, from 1 to 4 inches in diameter, which had been gnawed by mice the previous winter. A Norwegian winter for them, for the snow lay long and deep, and they were obliged to mix a large proportion of pine bark with their other diet. I think you can just eat bark. If we take a survival class, we could read a book on surviving in the woods in our next reading. These trees were alive and apparently flourishing at midsummer, and many of them had grown afoot, though completely girdled, but after another winter such were, without exception, dead. It is remarkable that a single mouse should thus be allowed a whole pine tree for its dinner, gnawing round instead of up and down it. But perhaps it is necessary in order to thin these trees, which are wont to grow up densely, which have a tendency, which want to have which are wont, W-O-N-T, a favorite word, to grow up densely. So the mouse's function is to thin the trees. The hares, Lepus americanus. Those are American rabbits. They're called Lepus americanus. Were very familiar. One at her farm under my house all winter, separated from me only by the flooring. And she startled me each morning by her hasty departure when I began to stir. Thump, 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 striking her head against the floor timbers in her hurry. They used to come round my door at dusk to nibble the potato parings which I had thrown out, were so nearly the color of the ground that they could hardly be distinguished when still. So you can't see a white rabbit in the snow, or the ground, the color of the ground. It could have been brown. Maybe they're brown rabbits. Sometimes in the twilight I alternatively lost and recovered sight of one sitting motionless under my window. When I opened my door in the evening, off they would go with a squeak and a bounce. Nor near at hand they only excited my pity. One evening one sat by my door 2 paces from me, at first trembling with fear, yet unwilling to move. A poor wee thing, lean and bony, with ragged ears and a sharp nose, scant tail and slender paws. It looked as if nature no longer contained a breed of nobler bloods but stood on her last toes. Its large eyes appeared young and unhealthy, almost dropsical. I took a step, and lo, away it scud with an elastic spring over the snow crust, straightening its body and its limbs into graceful length, and soon put the forest between me and itself, the wild, free venison. Asserting its figure and the dignity of nature, not without reason was its slenderness, since then was its nature. Lepus Levipus, Lightfoot, some think. What is the country without rabbits and partridges? They are among the most simple and indigenous animal products. Ancient, venerable families known to antiquity as to modern times, and of the very hue and substance of nature, nearest allied to leaves, to the ground, and to one another. It is either winged or it is legged. You know, out west in the, like the Grand Tetons and out in the west, like when they had, there was the joke of that, I think it was near the, maybe this was near the redwood forest in that park. They had a joke that a early period snack. You know what a snack is? What was the snack of early people, hunters? It was, if you wanted a snack, you just had a rabbit. So it's not potato chips and popcorn, whatever we have. It's a rabbit, and that's correct. So these are as a snack for hunters. As a rabbit. It is hardly as if they had seen a wild creature when a rabbit or partridge burst away, only a natural one, as much to be expected as rustling leaves. The partridge and the rabbit are still sure to thrive, like natives of the soil, whatever revolutions occur. But the forest is cut off. The sprouts and bushes which spring up afford them concealment, and they become more numerous than ever. That must be a poor country indeed that does not support a hare. Our woods teem with them both ends. Around every swamp may be seen the partridge or rabbit walk, beset with twiggy fences and horsehair snares, which some cowboy tends. I don't know how much rabbits are around now. But it's a poor country that can't support a rabbit. It's a poor country indeed that does not support a hare. That must be a poor country. Do you think we are supporting hares? Now, that's the end of the winter visitors. We come to the pond in winter. So we're reading about the pond and see how it relates to Smith Pond. After a still winter night, I awoke with the impression that some question had been put to me, which I had been endeavoring in vain to answer in my sleep, as what, how, when, where. But there were dawning nature, in whom all creatures live, looking in my broad windows with serene and satisfied face, and no question on her lips. I awoke to an answered question, to nature and daylight, the snow lying deep on the earth, dotted with young pines, and the very slope of the hill on which my house is placed seemed to say, forward. Nature puts no question and answers none which we mortals ask. Dear, do you get your questions answered in your sleep? Or are you sleeping? She has long ago taken her resolution, O Prince. Our eyes contemplate with admiration and transmit to the soul the wonderful and varied spectacle of this universe. This night veils without doubt a part of this glorious creation, but day comes to reveal to us this great work, which extends from earth even into the plains of the ether. Then to my morning work. First I take an axe and pail and go in search of water. If that be not a dream. Do you think he's dreaming, or is he going to get water with his axe? After a cold and snowy night, it needed a divining rod to find it. Every winter the liquid and trembling surface of the pond, which was so sensitive to every breath and reflected every light and shadow, becomes solid to the depth of a foot or a foot and a half, so that it will support the heaviest teams, and perchance the snow covers it to an equal depth. and it is not to be distinguished from any level field like the marmots in the surrounding hills. It closes its eyelids and becomes dormant for 3 months or more, standing on the snow-covered plain as if in a pasture among the hills. I cut my way first through a foot of snow, then a foot of ice, and open a window under my feet. So the snow is accumulated above the ice, and the ice is thickened. Where, kneeling to drink, I look down into the quiet parlor of the fishes, pervaded by a softened light, as through a window of ground glass with its bright sanded floor, the same as in summer. Their perennial waveless serenity reigns as in the amber twilight sun, corresponding to the cool and even temperament of the inhabitants. Heaven is under our feet, as well as over our heads. Heaven is under our feet, as well as over our heads. Do you think heaven is just up, or is it also down? I guess it would have to be both ways. Heaven is under our feet. We were mistaken. Early in the morning, while all things are crisp with frost, men come with fishing reels and slender lunch and let down their fine lines through the snowy field to take pickerel and perch. Don't they have perch in Lake Erie in Ohio? Wild men who instinctively follow other fashions and trust in other authorities than their townsmen, and by their goings and comings stitch towns together in parts where else they would be ripped. They sit and eat their luncheon in stout fear-noughts on the dry oak leaves on the shore, as wise in natural lore as the citizen is in artificio. They never consulted with books, and no one can tell, much less than they have done. The things which they practice are said not yet to be known. There is one fishing for pickerel, with grown perch for bait. They look into their pail with wonder as into a summer pond, as if he kept summer locked up at home, and knew where she had retreated. How, pray, did he get these in midwinter? Oh, he got worms out of rotten logs since the ground froze, and so he caught them. His life itself passes deeper into nature than the studies of the naturalist penetrate. However, a subject for the naturalist, the latter raises the moss and bark gently with his knife in search of insects. The former lays open logs to their core with his axe, and moss and bark fly far and wide. He gets his living by barking trees. Such a man has some right to fish, to love to see nature carried out in him. The perch swallows the grub worm. Do you think we should fish or not fish? To fish, or not to fish? Is that the question? Not we. I don't fish and I don't eat fish. I don't. That doesn't change the question in any way. The perch swallows the grubworm, the pickerel swallows the perch, and the fisherman swallows the pickerel, and so all the chinks in the scale of being are filled. Chinks, Chinks. Want chimp. If you want chinks, you have to fish. When I strolled around the pond in misty weather, I was sometimes amused by the primitive mode by which some ruder fisherman had adopted. He would perhaps have placed alder branches over the narrow holes in the ice, which were 4 or 5 rods apart, and an equal distance from the shore, and having fastened the end of the line to a stick to prevent its pulling through, have passed the slack line over a twig of the alder and a foot or more above the ice, and tied a dry oak leaf to it, which being pulled down would show when he had a bite. These alders loomed through the mist at regular intervals as he walked halfway round the pond. The pickerel of Walden, when I see them lying on the ice, or in the well which the fisherman cuts in the ice, making a little hole to admit the water, I am always surprised by their rare beauty, as if they were fabulous fishes. They are so foreign to the streets, even to the woods, foreign as Arabia to our conquered life. They possess a quite dazzling and transcendent beauty, which separates them by a wide interval from the cadaverous cod and haddock, whose fame is trumpeted in our streets. They are not green like the pines, nor gray like the stones, nor blue like the sky, but they have, to my eyes, if possible, yet rare colors, like flowers and precious stones, as if they were the pearls the animal lies, nuclei, or crystals of the Walden water. They, of course, are Walden all over and all through, are themselves small Waldens in the animal kingdom, Waldenses. It is surprising that they are caught here, but that in this deep and capacious spring, far beneath the rattling teams and chases and tingling sleighs that travel the Walden road, this great gold and emerald fish swims. I never chanced to see its kind in any market. It would be the cynosure of all eyes there. Easily, with a few convulsive quirks, they give up their watery ghost, like a mortal translated before his time to the thin air of heaven. As I was desirous to recover the long-lost bottom of Walden Pond, I surveyed it carefully. Before the ice broke up early in 1846, with compass and chain and sounding line, there have been many stories told about the bottom, or rather no bottom, of this pond, which certainly had no foundation for themselves. It is remarkable how long men will believe in the bottomlessness of a pond without taking the trouble to sound it. I have visited 2 such bottomless ponds in one walk in this neighborhood. Many have believed that Walden reached quite through to the other side of the globe. It actually did in a way. You know how it reached through all the way to Suzuki, writing about Zen and Japan. It reached Japan. terms of the Zen masters and their love of nature. Some who have lain flat on the ice for a long time, looking down through the elusive medium, perchance, with watery eyes into the bargain, and driven to hasty conclusions by the fear of catching cold in the breast, have seen vast holes into which a load of hay might be driven, if there were anybody to drive it, the undoubted source of the Styx and entrance to the infernal regions from these parts. Others have gone down from the village with a 56 and a wagon load of inch rope, but yet have failed to find any bottom. For while the 56 were resting by the side, they were paying out the rope in the vain attempt to fathom their truly immeasurable capacity for marvelousness. But I can assure my readers that Walden has a reasonably tight bottom at a not unreasonableness, though at an unusual depth. I fathomed it easily with a cotline and a stone weighing about a pound and a half, and could tell accurately when the stone left the bottom by having to pull so much harder before the water got underneath to help me. The greatest depth was exactly 102 feet. I thought I reached all the way to Japan and the sun 102 feet. It's pretty deep, to which may be added the 5 feet which it had risen since, making 107. This is a remarkable depth for so small an area, yet not an inch of it can be spared by the imagination. What if all ponds were shallow? Would it not react on the minds of men? I am thankful that this pond was made deep and pure for a symbol. I am thankful that this pond was made pure and deep and pure for a symbol. Are you thankful that Walden Pond book was made for a symbol of deep and pure? While men believe in the infinite, some ponds will be thought to be bottomless. Do you think that Thoreau's philosophy was a bottomless pit? Or transcendentalism is bottomless? A factory owner, hearing what depth I had found, thought that it could not be true, for judging from his acquaintance with damp sand would not lie at so steep an angle. But the deepest ponds are not so deep in proportion to their area as most suppose, and if drained would not leave very remarkable valleys. They are not like cups between the hills, for this one, which is so unusually deep for its area, appears in a vertical section through its center not deeper than a shallow plate. Most ponds emptied would leave a meadow no more hollow than we frequently see. William Gilpin, who is so admirable in all that relates to landscapes and usually so correct, standing at the head of Loch Fyne in Scotland, which he describes as a, quote, a bay of salt water, 60 and 70 fathoms deep, 4 miles in breadth, and about 50 miles long, surrounded by mountains, observes, quote, if we could have seen it immediately after the diluvian crash, or whatever convulsion of nature occasioned it, before the waters gushed in, what a horrid chasm it must have appeared. So high as heaved the torment hills, so low down sunk a hollow bottom, broad and deep, capacious bed of waters. But if, using the shortest diameter of Loch Fyne, we apply these proportions to Walden, which, as we have seen, appears already in a vertical section only like a shallow plate, it will appear 4 times as shallow. So much for the increased horrors of the chasm of Loch Fyne when emptied. No doubt many a smiling valley with its stretching cornfields occupies exactly such a, quote, horrid chasm, unquote, from which the waters have receded, though it requires the insight and the farsight of the geologist to convene the unsuspecting inhabitants of this fact. Often an inquisitive eye may detect the shores of a primitive lake in the low horizontal hills, and no subsequent elevation of the plain have been necessary to conceal the history, but as easiest as they who work on the highways know to find the hollows by the puddles after a shower. The amount of it is the imagination. Give it the least license, dives deeper and soars higher than nature goes, so probably the depth of the ocean will be found to be very inconsiderable compared with its breadth. As I sounded through the ice, I could determine the shape of the bottom with greater accuracy than is possible in surveying harbors which do not freeze over, and I was surprised at its general regularity. In the deepest part there are several acres more level than almost any field which is exposed to the sun, wind, and plow. In one instance, on a line arbitrarily chosen, the depth did not vary more than 1 foot in 30 rods, and generally near the middle. I could calculate the variation for each 100 feet in any direction beforehand, within 3 or 4 inches. Some are accustomed to speak of deep and dangerous holes, even in quiet sandy ponds like this, but the effect of water under these circumstances is to level all inequalities. Seems water will level all inequalities. Didn't they say the wise man sort of is like humility seeks the lowest level, like water? Humility. The regularity of the bottom and its conformity to the shores and the range of the neighboring hills were so perfect that the distant promontory betrayed itself in the soundings quite across the pond, and its direction could be determined by observing the opposite shore. Cape becomes bar and plain, shoal and valley and gorge, deep water and channel. When I had mapped the pond by the scale of 10 rods to an inch, and put down the soundings more than 100 in all, I observed this remarkable coincidence. That's in Polish English. Having noticed that the number indicating the greatest depth was apparently in the center of the map, the greatest depth in the center of the map, I laid a rule on the map likewise, and then breadthwise, and found to my surprise that the line of greatest length intersected the line of greatest breadth exactly at the point of greatest depth. The line of greatest length intersected the line of greatest breadth exactly at the point of greatest depth. Notwithstanding that the middle was so nearly level, and the breadth were got by measuring into the coves, and I said to myself, who knows but this hint would conduct to the deepest part of the ocean as well as of a pond or puddle? Is not this the rule also for the height of mountains? regarded as the opposite of valleys. We know that a hill is not highest at its narrowest part. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know the significance of the greatest depth. Of 5 coves, the 3 or all which had been sounded were observed to have a bark wide across their mouths and deeper water within, so that the bay tended to be an expansion of water within the land, not only horizontally or vertically, and to form a basin or independent pond, the direction of the 2 capes sounding the course of the bar. Every harbor on the sea coast also had its bar at its entrance, in proportion as the mouth of the cove was wider compared with its length. The water over the bar was deeper compared with that in the basin. Given then the length and breadth of the cove, and the character of the sounding shore, we have almost elements enough to make out a formula for all cases. Are you making coffee early today? Because it needs to be 8:30 maybe. Huh? You want to make it? Huh? In order to see how nearly I could guess with this experience at the deepest point in a pond, by observing the outlines of its surface and the character of its shores alone, I made a plan of White Pond, which contains about 41 acres, and like this has no island in it, nor any visible inlet or outlet, in the line of greatest breadth fell very near the line of least breadth, where 2 opposite capes approached each other and 2 opposite bays receded. I ventured to mark a point a short distance from the latter line, but still on the line of greatest length as the deepest. The deepest part was found to be within 100 feet of this, still farther in the direction in which I had inclined, and was only 1 foot deeper, namely 60 feet. Of course, a stream running through or an island in the pond would make the problem much more complicated. So we read about how Walden Pond reached its greatest depth exactly where the greatest length and breadth and the cross intersection of the breadth and the length met. And it was the deepest pond, now found to be in Massachusetts. And we found that he was thankful that this pond was made deep and pure as a symbol of his book. The depth of the pond was either 102 or 107 feet. As many believe that Walden reached quite through to the other side of the globe, all the way to the Zen Buddhist in Japan, and that Walden Pond may have been bottomless, or at least in the abstract version of the book, the thought was bottomless. I'm done.